There's an astoundingly small amount of critical literature concerning the self-portrait photograph, and I find this especially interesting given the fact that there's such a prevalence of self-portrait photographs in today's society. So I thought perhaps then that Roland Barthes, our friend and late colleague in Camera Lucida, could do something to both help us conceptualize precisely how the self-portrait photograph functions within our mind, and also how the self-portrait photograph functions within its own sphere, so sort of the politics of representation in the self-portrait photograph. I'll start with a quote. Barthes says, "In front of the lens, I am at the same time the one I think I am, the one I want others to think I am, the one the photographer thinks I am, and the one he makes use of to exhibit his art. In other words, a strange action. I do not stop imitating myself, and because of this, each time I am or let myself be photographed, I invariably suffer from a sensation of inauthenticity." I think the implications here, as far as the fact that there's this fragmented subject within photography, are very interesting with regards to self-portrait photography, because here, of course, you have a subject that is also the same as the photographer. So the self-portrait photograph, then, can either be especially sincere, because the photographer may be unable to separate him or herself from his or her position as subject, in which case that position merges, or it can be especially inauthentic, because this photographer is able to so artificially separate him or herself into these two spheres of photographer and subject. And I think because these two possibilities exist within self-portrait photographs, this possibility of inauthenticity or authenticity or sincerity, this is what makes a self-portrait photograph so intriguing to us, and especially this one in particular, because we see that possibility, even though we might not immediately realize it upon looking at the image. It's very earnest, that makes self-portrait photography, but also frequently refers to the ideas of studium and punctum. Studium being the overarching sort of message or feeling of the photo that can be observed by really anyone that cares to pay attention. So here the studium would refer to perhaps this overarching quality of melancholy and of sadness, something that's quite observable to us as viewers. Versus the punctum, which is the more individual quality of the photo, something that sort of stings the individual viewer, not all of the time, but some of the time, and leaves this impression of the photo with the viewer, an impression that lasts. So here, I think the punctum is perhaps this latent erotic quality. We see Southworth is obviously shirtless. We don't know whether he's completely naked, so that suggests some sort of eroticism. But we also see that in these harsh shadows, his well-muscled frame is very clearly visible. So in this respect, we wonder whether his expression is not one of melancholy, but one of yearning. Those emotions certainly aren't incompatible, and maybe perhaps here some of both is being shown. The studium and the punctum are interacting on some sort of level. But what else is so striking about this photo? For Barthes, photos held a particular attraction and a particular liveliness because somebody had actually seen the referent in real life. That is, the photographer had actually witnessed the subject. However, we see in self-portrait photography that this isn't expressly true. Because the photograph is the subject, the photographer never actually sees the referent. So in this case, I think, this is responsible somewhat for the removed quality, for the spectral quality, for the even dead quality, I could say, of this image, because we know that nobody here has seen the referent besides Southworth himself, and obviously he couldn't see himself taking the picture. But also associates a quality of depth with the picture, along with this quality of life, which we talked about earlier. Because the photograph is so bound up with this temporal level, because it only takes place in a minute of time and only captures the singular moment, it's very much associated with the has-been, with the dead. So in this case, I think, self-portrait photography also fits into this sort of schema for conceptualizing self-portrait photography. So it's in this sense, self-portrait photography is doubly dead. However, I think this does nothing really to decrease the power, the psychological power of the image, which Barthes talks about often in this book. Barthes says, "The photograph is violent, not because it shows violent things, but because on each occasion it fills the sight by force, and because in it nothing can be refused or transformed." So I think we see this overwhelming quality of the image, despite the image being somehow dead within the Southworth photograph. We see this overwhelming quality of the image is somehow inexplicable. And even though we can make these observations about the image, even though we can attempt to rationalize our interest in it, ultimately we only do what Barthes says, graze the surface of the image.
Visions of you, do you see what I do? I'm dreaming up wishes, wishing up dreams, and living with visions of you. Visions of you. Is your kiss